Welcome to the High Pressure Podcast with me, George Rotterman.
And me, Marie Williams. Brought to you by Reliably Ratterman.
Bringing you industry news and trends.
Plus, insightful conversations with industry leaders.
Let's get to today's show.
Okay, welcome back to the High Pressure Podcast. We have another solution session for you where we answer common customer questions with a Ratterman expert. Today we have Josh Drury, and welcome, Josh.
Thank you.
And we also have George Ratterman back for the second time. George, welcome to your own podcast. How's it feel to be here?
I got to tell you what, it is fantastic to be back on the High Pressure Podcast. And it's also great. One of my favorite people, Josh, works for Rotterman Manufacturing, having him on and talking about what we specialize in the beverage area.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be diving into pretty much everything beverage and the most common questions we get in regards to the beverage liquid cylinders that we provide here at Ratterman Manufacturing. All right. So, George, do you want to get into this?
I do. So, Josh, if I was to ask you here, what are some of the top two things that people really, when they're going to do an installation, need to be thinking about? What are those top two things that come up?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing is you got to make sure that your customer's sized accordingly. Is this tank going to fit the needs that they have from a distributor standpoint? Is this a tank that I'm going to be filling weekly because that's inefficient? Or is it a tank we're going to be filling every 3 to 4 weeks, which is going to be more efficient? From there, you look at your footprint where you're installing the tank. Number one, is this going to be indoors? Am I going to be plumbing it to a fill box where a truck driver is going to fill it from the outside? Or is the tank going to be positioned outside the building? Because when you're putting the tank inside the building, you have to start thinking about plumbing and all the other ancillary parts, as well as safety precautions with your CO2 meter, so on and so forth. So those are the top two things that you really need to address before you decide, what size tank and where am I going to put it within the customer facility.
So one of the things I think is really interesting is how the tank's going to be used in what application and how much that can change things. One of the things we know is that there's the need to be able to take a liquid and phase it into gas in most applications. So when we look at that, maybe touch on the difference between if you're a movie theater as an example, and everybody comes in one time and they're all getting sodas at one time. There's a massive draw in a very short amount of time. And then people are in the movies and there's a gap in between. So how touch a little bit on the sizing and the use piece.
That's another great question, George. So the great part about the tanks, whether it's a 300, a 550, a 750, and also the 1000 size tank, is what they do is they're pulling the gas off the head pressure of the tank. So you've got liquid at the bottom of the tank and the gas with the pressure at the top. So what happens is you're pulling all those sodas off and that pressure is starting to drop off the top end, the head pressure. Well, you don't want to run out of that gas because you got to continuously provide the soda. So what happens is the coils start pushing that liquid through and bringing it back up to build the pressure back up in the tank so that you have that constant supply of gaseous CO2 for your sodas at all times.
Well, Josh, as gas people, we are always looking for a way to sell more gas. So all of our distributors care about where and how we can sell more gas. So when we look at opportunities and what's going on and what's kind of happening right now between the cannabis and beverage and beer and breweries and other markets and grower houses, what things would you say right now for distributor? What are you seeing out there?
Well, first and foremost, as a distributor, where are you? Certain states are going to be allowed to have opportunities for the grow houses. Other states are much larger in brewing than soda, and then vice versa. There'll be certain states where there's not as much brewery access and more soda. You start looking at stadiums, theme parks, gas station chains, restaurants. All of these are an opportunity for you to get into the CO2 market. And once you start stacking up a few of these customers, it allows you to bring in the capital to start taking care of them and hopefully expanding into other markets as well. But first and foremost, it's regional. Find out what there is in your region and make yourself a part of that community so that you can help provide the CO2 for them.
Yeah, that's a great point. I know that many rules and laws do change. Boy, you see a lot of things happen once those laws and rules change. A lot of times it's after the first year. The first year is coming up. A lot of times, a lot of things go implemented at the first year. So it's a good thing for people to look into, see what those opportunities might be in the cannabis market. And then we have other markets. Are you seeing the largest growth? What is there? Is a food industry as far as food chains, or is it overall restaurants at this point, or what would you recommend if somebody's going to spend their time looking for the market segment?
The restaurants is a huge business. You're constantly seeing people expand, especially post COVID. You're seeing more of the fast food, the DoorDash. They're delivering all this stuff to you, and you see them going up on all these different corners everywhere. The other market that people sometimes don't think of when it comes to CO2 is the pool industry. They use the CO2 to balance the pH without having to use as many chemicals as traditionally you had to. And that's another great market to get into with your municipal pools, school pools, university pools, so on and so forth.
Yeah, any of the theme parks, resorts, different places like that might be putting in facilities. When we look at the CO2, there's been a lot happening in the CO2 market relative to the environment and what type things might be happening with sequestering of CO2 and free air capturing of CO2. Could you touch on that a little bit? Is there some opportunities for people as they look at uh, some of the things that are happening in the marketplace relative to CO2 capturing?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of optimism and positivity coming out of that side of the market. I was just at the CO2 summit here in Nashville, and a lot of these people are finding that the government's going to be more open to CO2 sequestration, uh, carbon capture, and there'll be a lot more opportunity to get your hands on product from reliable sources. Also, you're going to see multiple sources, so you're not going to be handcuffed with having to go to one or two people. You'll have multiple viable options within your region across the US.
Yeah, I know there's a tremendous amount of need right now for transporting of CO2 due to the shortages in certain areas. Um, and what's also interesting, part of what's happening in the CO2 is the growth in the CO2. There's other markets relative to that, relative to the dry ice and other areas that people are, building their own dry ice in their facilities for being able to use rice for blasting and different things. So touch on that a little bit. Opportunities there for people.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, George. We were seeing more and more of our suppliers out in the field start to educate themselves on the dry ice market, where it can be used. Refineries, they're going through tons of CO2 and shutdowns. You're seeing it with not just the sodas that are at the restaurants, but the soda manufacturers are going through a lot of product, and that's high volume. You're able to get good margins on that CO2, and it's another arena that you can jump into.
Yeah. So when we look at distribution of CO2 and efficiency and the effectiveness of that, a lot of it has to do with the tank and how the tank can operate once being filled and the speed in which it can build pressure and a number of other things. Could you touch a little bit on that as far as when you look at the tank, what matters to a person in doing an installation? What are the kind of two or three key elements that they'd be wanting to think about to be able to take it, the opportunity to take advantage of getting in that market?
Yeah, so I love this question because you have a disconnect sometimes from the purchasing agent who's buying the tank, and then you have the install technician who's actually installing and taking care of the tank. When you talk to these guys, the boots on the ground that are putting these tanks in or even filling the tanks, I've been out personally with a few of our customers and their truck drivers, you get the best feedback. Ultimately, what they want is they want a safe, reliable tank that when they put it in place, they really don't have to worry too much about it. It's going to operate. They're not going to get the phone calls from their customers saying, A, there's a tank issue, or B, we're out of product. If you can handle those two main items, you're set.
Yeah. And let's talk about flow a little bit. That's such a big piece when you're looking at putting in a tank. What's the usage going to be? Would you mind touching a little bit on just how we're going to go from liquid into gas, phasing into gas, how that tank does that, and the sizing that the gas needs?
Yeah. So once again, when we get to the sizing on the tanks, you really want to break it down to what is your customer consuming compared to how often am I going to have to make the delivery. So on something like CO2, it doesn't take much pressure to run the soda machines. It varies amongst the different types of beers or blends that you have out there, but it's never going to be a real high pressure. With these larger easy carb tanks, let's talk about the 550 or the 750. that's going to give you plenty of product to run multiple fountains for days on end. And one of the other options that we have with this is telemetry. So you're not having to actually physically go out there and look and see where is the tank at. The telemetry options, which we have multiple to pick from, allow you to get a reading at your desk and you get a better idea of how your customer is consuming the product. Um, the tanks themselves are designed to pull off that head pressure to keep up with the rate of CO2 that they're consuming. And the liquid down below, as that head pressure starts to drop, is able to create that liquid and turn it into a gas to maintain the pressure so that you constantly have CO2 delivery.
There's also something else I'd like you to touch on, Josh, which is the coil. You know, traditionally there were a copper coil that was inside there that went from the liquid, brought it around to the shell of the tank, which would bring in the heat and help it then, phase into gas. But we did something a little different on our tank, right?
Yeah, we sure did. We went with a stainless steel coil, which is a lot more durable. If you've ever worked on a dock anywhere moving liquid cylinders, some of the older ones, when you wiggle them around, it sounds like there's a slinky inside of there. And what it is just wear and tear over time, and those copper coils become separated from the wall. So not only did we put in the stainless steel coils to conduct the heat more evenly and efficiently, but we've also gone to a laser welded process which ensures that those coils stay attached to the wall so that they do continue to give you maximum efficiency on the tanks.
Yeah. And then I think also it helps as far as any kind of interface with the product. It's the interface now, CO2 is being directly to a stainless, which is a good thing from a
Yeah, you
purity
do
perspective.
minimize some of the corrosion and other things that can happen with the copper material.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Is there anything else that you'd recommend as far as somebody when they're looking at being profitable or more profitable with their CO2 applications and delivery?
Having product, if you talk to a lot of the people that are in the CO2 game that actually go out and do the beverage or do the beer or the grow, is making sure that you have a steady supply that allows you to have more assets at the ready. So when a customer calls and says, "Hey, I'm interested, I need a tank," you're not giving them a long lead time to get somebody out there installing it. You can do it in the next week or two, and having that available to the customer is going to be a huge positive for you and guarantee you the business.
Yeah. One of the things that product manufacturers are always talking about is being proactive, looking ahead, what could maybe not go right? What could we do to avoid that happening? Is there anything that you would see as people are looking at their tanks and maintain their fleets of tanks that they could do that's a preventative maintenance when a driver stops by or sales rep? Is there any of those kind of things you'd suggest?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what you see on these tanks that are placed inside or outside of a building is they become a dumping ground. I just saw one outside of Austin that had literally been turned into an ashtray for the employees of the building. Obviously, we don't recommend that. So, as you're out there making your deliveries, or if you're a sales rep calling on your customer, make sure that the top ends are free of debris or people setting things up there. The drivers that I've been out with make sure that they carry proper wrenches and equipment, double check the fittings while they're filling it, making sure that there's no obvious leaks. Besides that, the tanks are durable and they're ready to run. So if you can handle the little things, the tank's going to last you quite a bit of time in the field.
If you get the phone call that somebody says, my tank is not building pressure, I just don't have enough pressure, my equipment's not working correctly, what would be your troubleshoot go to?
Yeah, so if they're calling me directly, one of the things I like to do is try and FaceTime with them to talk them through what the top end components are and what they're looking at. It could be something that something's not hooked up correctly, or maybe the tank's empty, or maybe the pressure builder, or in the case of the 750s, the economizer is not working accordingly. If you call, we can kind of talk you through it and get you where you need to be. I would say, George, 90% of the time, we can troubleshoot it over the phone and get you up and running fairly quick.
Yeah, that's great. I love that idea of actually getting on the FaceTime or something like that where you're seeing it and working together on stepping through things. Because then the person has that much more comfort, right, as far as what to do for the next time. So that's a really good tip. I think for all of us in our companies, there's some times we can go back and forth on emails, and sometimes it's just a matter of hopping on a Zoom or a FaceTime and seeing what we're looking at, and it's like, oh, okay, now we got it.
Yeah, it's after the fourth or fifth text you finally go, my thumbs can't take it anymore. Let me call you and we're going to get this resolved.
So Josh, the other day I was talking to somebody at our facility in Houston and Nashville, and they said to me that they had to get sunglasses. I said, my gosh, what do we need sunglasses for? They said, need to be standard issue sunglasses. And I said, okay, what is that exactly for? And they said, well, our facility, we have so many tanks that we've brought in to support the marketplace that when the sun's out and it shines in the building, you can't see as you walk in the door. It's so bright and shiny. So we have a tremendous inventory, expanded sizes that we've brought in to be able to ship the same day. And we've set up things even with our freight companies such that we can get things out the same day, even later orders later in the day, they still get out the same day. So you would touch on that, maybe the key sizes and some of your overview on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, having spent the last year boots on the ground, meeting with customers and talking with them, it's very evident these tanks are not a one size fits all. So, as a whole, Ratterman looked at it and said, okay, what are the customers needing? What do they want? And once again, that's regional as well. Some places you have to have legs on them to clean up underneath. Some customers like having legs on them. Some people prefer to have flat bottoms, especially if they're going outdoors, they can just set it on the ground. And of course, the various different sizes. So currently, we are carrying the 300 with legs. We're carrying the 550 with legs and flat bottom. We're carrying the 750 with legs and flat bottom. And now we're currently carrying a 1000, which really caters to the microbrew situations as well as the grow houses. And of course, that is a flat bottom tank. We also have an option for the customers right now where if they want to have an internal versatile fleet, you can buy flat bottom tanks and we have leg attachments that bolt on very easily. So we really do have a broad spectrum to make sure that when you call, it's here. And like you said, we're going to get it shipped out to you that day, if not the next day.
Yeah. My understanding is if you buy 10 or more of our tanks, you get a beautiful pair of sunglasses.
Beautiful pair of sunglasses from the finest gas station in town.
Okay. Great. So Josh, thanks so much for being on the High Pressure Solution Sessions. It was really great having you today. As a host, you made it easy. You got all that knowledge from all the folks we've been working with around the country. So it was just a pleasure to have you on today.
George, thanks for having me and thanks for entrusting me with this part of the business.
You're welcome and great job.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay up to date with the latest news in the gas and welding industry by clicking on the subscribe button.
And check out one of our other videos to learn more. Find out more about Reliably Ratterman at rmiorder.com.